With me is former Department of Justice Senior Attorney and former federal prosecutor Tammy Allison. Tammy, thank you so much for being with me this evening.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so first off, let me just ask you from your experience, what did the prosecution want the jury to take away from the testimony of these paramedics?
Well, it sounded like the prosecution wanted the jury to know that in order for Derek Smith, the paramedic, to do his job, the officers were still on Mr. Floyd's neck. Initially, it was 8 minutes and 46 seconds. We've heard from the prosecution that in reality, it was 9 minutes and 29 seconds. So almost 10 minutes of Mr. Chauvin's knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. Mr. Smith, the paramedic, arrives. He tries to get a pulse, and Mr. Chauvin still does not move. He checks his pupils. He still does not move. Derek Chauvin does not move. And the prosecution really wants to hit home on the fact that even when the paramedic arrived to render aid to George Floyd, that Derek Chauvin was just adamant on keeping his knee on George Floyd's neck, which clearly contributed to his death. And what that does, it cuts away at the defense's argument that his death has anything other to do than Mr. Chauvin's knee on his neck. We've already heard the defense try to bring up George Floyd's past drug addiction with the girlfriend on the stand and their prior drug use, but the prosecution did a really great job at really walking through the steps that it takes for a paramedic to actually render aid to a patient and the obstruction that this paramedic had in being able to do his job.
Now, the defense actually was able to make a little bit of hay of a couple of things. First thing they were able to get from one of the paramedics was that he has seen folks revived from overdoses or other issues, that people on drugs, and wake up violently. Or someone had been knocked out and wake up violently. So there's that, because again, they're arguing that there was a need to keep the knee on the neck because they were afraid of this sort of violent reaction. And they also got out of them that they had to do a grab and go. And basically what that means, Tammy, is that when they arrived, they perceived the situation to be a little bit sort of uncontrollable in their eyes, so they decided to pick up George, put him in, get him someplace else where they could then provide medical care. I want to get your thoughts on whether the defense did a decent job of getting some information out of them that could help their case.
No, not at all, because we already heard testimony from the expert officer that testified that you only keep that type of force on an individual when they are resisting. Here, Mr. Floyd clearly was not moving. He was not a threat to anyone. He was already in handcuffs. Even the paramedic said when he arrived, he was in handcuffs. They were still in position. Not until he got him into the back of what he called the rig was he himself able to take the keys that he had to uncuff Mr. Floyd, who at that point was already dead. So in my opinion, no, the defense did not do a good job at making any type of headway to cut away at the culpability of Derek Chauvin and the cause of death of Mr. Floyd being his knee on his neck for that 9 minutes and 29 seconds.